Hey guys, normal voice for Alaska here. I know, it's crazy. Not like you haven't really heard my voice before, but anyways. I just want to put a bit of a disclaimer. I know it has the worst place on Earth history in the title, but this video isn't really gonna be like the other videos. I mean, there's not really any history to go over anyway. This video is really just a reflection now that everything is finished, and it's mostly just gonna be my personal opinions on some of these things. I was never really intending to make another video on this again, but I just feel the need to finish the trilogy, you know? And I've just got a lot of thoughts on my mind surrounding the whole thing, so... And the worst place on Earth was just different to me in some weird way. And I'm sure some of you don't hold it nearly as highly as I do, and some of you even forgot that it existed, probably. But the fact that I'm making a third video on this should really say enough, I think. In an attempt to add some structure to this video, I'm gonna make it into sections, and I feel like it's only fitting to start with the only history that has really happened since the last video. And yes, there is a bit. I know I just said that there isn't, but, well, it's fitting to start with it. At the end of the worst place on Earth history 2, I stated that the server wasn't really archived properly, and yeah, that's still true. I mean, as I'm writing this script, the most recent message in the worst place on Earth was yesterday. To think how many people hated this place before it went down, to see some people still talk there, even almost a year after its death, is really strange to me. I think Wiro knows what's going on, at least to a small extent, but I think it's fair enough that he hasn't really done much about it. I don't really think there's anything worth noting in what's actually being said in these unarchived threads, aside from the fact that most people there are new members for some reason. Okay, I also know that I said I wasn't going to cover any of the Worst Place on Earth spin-offs at the end of the Worst Place on Earth History 2, but it's kind of part of the legacy that the server left, so I feel like it's worth talking about, at least just a little bit. I wasn't in any of these, really, and to my knowledge, and I'm sure there must have been different stuff going on in each of them, but I'm pretty sure they all shut down for almost exactly the same reason, which is really not shocking. There was even a third generation of the Worst Place on Earth spin-offs, and I did stalk one of these. I think it was called the Capybara Emporium, and that shit was nasty. To everyone who was a part of that server, I actually really hope you feel ashamed of yourself. Never have I seen so much childishness, and I feel like it was, in that sense, a really fair recreation of the Worst Place on Earth. But most of these servers were really just desperate attempts to get back some of the unique feelings that the Worst Place on Earth had, but really that desperation really just led to the worst aspects coming over. Okay, so I feel like I did a pretty bad job at explaining why the Worst Place on Earth really ended in the last video, mainly because of bias, and that is a big problem with the video in general. I and many others would have just put it down to poor moderation and annoying new members, which, while true, they're only some of the reasons really. And in my opinion, there's really one main reason for the entire decline of the Worst Place on Earth. It all comes down to just one image. This image, this hate symbol, is the true reason why the Worst Place on Earth failed. And I'm not fucking around. This image allowed for so much hate, it's actually kind of unreal. Just think about it. Were annoying new members really the reason why the server was archived? Or was it the attitude towards them? Like, annoying new members are just part of the course with any of these meme YouTuber servers, especially for one like Wiro. and they always have been there. If it weren't for realistic Bart Simpson allowing for such an easy way to hate people, I think there would have been way less hate. And yes, this is really my fault. I think I was the one who added this in the first place. If not, I feel like I really popularized using it for just outright hating people. Another thing similar to this is the dream sexual role, and I really brushed over this a couple times in the last videos, but this is really just because I knew I was in the wrong with this, and it's hard to get evidence that it ever really existed.
Hello gamers, don't mind the background thing. I'm banned on the Werewolf Discord server. I mean, I'm actually not banned, I'm muted because the owner thought it would be funny to add me to the dream sexual role. Now, I don't like dream. Now, what does that do in the official Werewolf Discord server? It mutes you for like forever until you get that evil off your goddamn ass.
It was just cruel, really, and an entire feature just made for the admins to abuse people who they personally deemed unfunny is just terrible. There were a few more reasons, like the oversaturation of just everything, and I'm very much guilty of this as well. The amount of content the Worst Place on Earth had to every other server is just wow. It's probably very overwhelming for people who just wanted to talk, but it's a bit less of a big deal. And of course the moderation was, yeah, it was atrocious. There's no denying that that is clearly one of the main reasons that it ended. I've heard genuine accounts thinking that the Worst Place on Earth was an anarchy server. It's just really no shock that it ended. This is the real meat of the video, and damn, I am just left with my head in my hands at some of the stuff that happened in this server. There are things in the Worst Place on Earth that I absolutely refuse to speak upon. Never have I seen more disgusting and vile behaviour. Some of you are fine though, but most of you are guilty. All guilty. If the Worst Place on Earth member list was a police lineup, it would be an execution. Some of you were probably in those Epstein documents. If I were to ask the average the Worst Place on Earth member whether the humour was bad, I'm pretty sure it would be an undeniable yes. And I'm not talking about this lame ass unfunny shit with new members who just copy their crackback humour from just everywhere. No. Take a look at the channel of the Worst Place on Earth Funnies. Funnies. This channel is designed for all of the funniest messages, and just looking at there, I mean, what do I see? I love children and killing them, gay with black people, child in my mouth. What is this shit? And I was literally the one posting these. I was the owner, and I allowed this? To those of you who didn't have this humor, you're better, especially Wiro. This guy out here is the only person with power who ever did anything to stop any of this, and whenever he did get anything about it, he got shit for it. I mean, child porn is literally in the trailer for the server. I don't think I could have made a better advertisement if I tried. Okay, so the humor is a bit edgy. I mean, so what? No harm done, right? But harm's done. Who would have known that a server so centered around child porn would have caused so much? But serious talk though. It is never, ever, ever, ever the fault of the minor in any grooming situation. Even if they are acting older than they should be, it's always the responsibility of the older person to recognize this and shut it down before it all gets out of hand. But unfortunately, even if it is never their fault, there will always still be factors that can make people a target for this kind of thing. And the Worst Place on Earth normalized children acting in overly sexual ways, and it's difficult for those who are really attached to it to recognize and detach from reality and what's normal. And I would know. I remember once, my mum walked in and saw the types of things discussed in the worst place on earth. Rape, child porn. She was so ashamed of me. I mean, she knew that I was in charge of this. I had to tell her that these are the kind of things I punish people for saying. But it was literally one of the admins who was saying this. And I was left there thinking, if this is the type of behavior that I have to explain to outsiders as being unacceptable, why am I allowing this disgusting behavior in the first place? Except, I didn't think that. Not for a second. Because to me, it's all normal. And this influence factor and detachment from reality is how some of the most successful pedophiles from the worst place on earth have gotten away with it, at least for a way longer time than someone who would just draw an image, for example. Those who target people because they know that they're vulnerable, since how they act in the server is unhinged, often get away with it, as they know it will be just way easier. It's the type of person who wouldn't tell anyone, because they didn't know the severity of their situation whilst they were in it. I don't want to use examples, but there's a reason why so many more people know about the Con Ones incident and not the Dripped Out Jinx one. And that's because Dripped Out Jinx specifically targeted people who were more sexually active when speaking in the worst place on earth. And I don't want to sympathize with pedophiles, but there's even a chance that same influence that affected the victims is what drove them to thinking that it's okay to act like that way in the first place. But for the most part, these people got what they deserved. It's vile, all of it. I don't know really how to conclude this bit. This shit just makes me depressed and feel like nothing good came from the worst place on earth at all. At least nothing good enough to eclipse some of the terrible stuff that happened here. I didn't even cover all of the stuff. Like all of the small servers that stemmed from the worst place on earth that just existed to trade porn, and most of it is furry too. Like, Jesus Christ, I had the power to stop this. And knowing that a significant portion of those people were lying about their age and were actually 12 years old, it's just tragic. I guess my advice to anyone going through something similar, and the hardest part is realizing you are even in this situation in the first place, is to just take a step back and ask yourself, is this how I would interact with anyone else in real life? And then if it's not, you just need to cut it, uninstall social media and just take a break. And my advice, if I was time traveling to 2021 or early 2023, is to check your Discord server list, and if the worst place on earth is in there, leave it. I feel like I'm overdue to move on to something a bit more positive. We all had different reasons for joining the worst place on earth, but no matter what that reason is, we all had the same reason to stay. Coming off the back of that entire segment, I know it may sound hard to believe, but I've met some of the most genuine and nice people over the internet through the worst place on earth. Like, I know I've beat the shit out of that funniest messages channel earlier, but to those who didn't rely entirely on the crude humor, you guys were some of the funniest people I've met online. To all the artists out there as well, honestly, the art output from the worst place on earth was just so amazing. Just continue to do good things, please. And to Wiro specifically, although I really doubt that you're seeing this, no matter how many times I apologize to you about stealing your server, I don't think it will ever be enough. So, one last time, I am sorry. I'm finding it hard to summarize the worst place on Earth in one word, like good or bad, because it's not really black and white. Just as well, I'm finding it hard to say that the worst place on Earth was good. Don't get me wrong, it was in some aspects, and even though not all of it was terrible, I do think the negatives outweigh the positives. But just because something was bad doesn't mean it wasn't worth being involved in. It was a learning experience, you know? We all took something away from it, and if you didn't, well, I hope you do now. A month after this video comes out, I'm gonna unlist all of the worst place on Earth history videos and put them into a playlist. It's really time to move on, and for that reason this will be the last The Worst Place on Earth history, for the better in my book. Goodbye.